Mato Anomalies is a detective noir JRPG with a striking comic book inspired art style set to release in 2023. I remember seeing the announcement trailer for this game and thought it looked pretty cool. Well, recently the developers reached out to me and asked if I wanted to play a build and share my thoughts on it, and I thought, hey, why not? So this video is sponsored by Mato Anomalies. And I know what you're thinking. I can't be objective because this is a sponsored video, right? Well, I'm way ahead of you and even asked them if I could be as honest as I wanted to, and they agreed. And just you wait, because boy, am I going to be honest in this video. First, let me explain the game and give a general overview, and then I'll share my thoughts with you. Mato Anomalies is set in the futuristic inspired city of Mato. Think of Blade Runner in Hong Kong. In the game you play as Do, and he travels around the city solving mysteries as a detective, I think. I say I think because this build dropped me into the middle of the game with no explanation of really anything, so I really don't know what's going on. I wish I could explain more, but I literally have no idea what's going on or who anyone really is. It would have been nice to have a little primer before going into this, but unfortunately there wasn't one for me to check out. In terms of the story presentation, it mixes it up with three different styles. One is the side-by-side character portraits talking to each other, which you've probably seen in many games before and is what you'll see in most of the game. Next are the more cinematic moments with characters that are fully animated with subtitles below them. And lastly are these comic-style panels. The game will mix up all three sporadically. Now let's talk about the gameplay, and here there's also three main activities. One is exploring the city, just gathering information and talking to characters. The other is this interrogation card game called Mind Hack, and another is exploring dungeons. Now when you're exploring the city, it's pretty straightforward. There will be a red exclamation point icon always pointing you in the right direction. In these segments, you kind of run around town talking to NPCs just trying to get information. In the Mind Hack segments, you use cards to do different types of damage to characters' psyche as you're trying to get them to confess. I will say this mechanic is odd, and I'll have a lot to say about this in a minute. As for the dungeons, they're pretty standard affair where you'll just kind of explore, get to the end, have turn-based combat, enemies will have weaknesses, and one unique thing is that all your characters share one HP pool. Now that I've shared a general overview, let me share my honest thoughts with you. I really wish I could say more about the story, but as I mentioned earlier, I was dropped somewhere in the middle of the game and I have no idea what's going on or what any of these characters are doing. It could be cool, but I was just too confused to grasp anything. One thing I can say is that the performances are mediocre at best. The character Butterfly probably gives the strongest performance, but that's only because the rest of the cast are so bland.
Your hands are strong, girl. What kind of drugs are you taking? Let go or I'll send you my hospital bill.
Stop struggling and answer the questions.
Hey, outside.
If you so choose, you can do Japanese or even Chinese voice acting. I will say that I really dug the visual style. It kind of reminded me of a Telltale game in a lot of ways. That said, I was kind of confused why they had so many different kinds of presentational styles. In my opinion, I think the comic panels fit the vibe of this game the best, as it kind of goes with the art style really well. Now, admittedly, the game doesn't have the biggest budget, so these fully animated cutscenes kind of show the limitations of the budget, so in my opinion, I think it would be smart of them to stick to more of these comic book panels. The music here is more atmospheric than melodic. You won't be humming any of the tunes when you're not playing the game, but it helps set the mood really well. I dug it quite a bit, whether exploring the city or fighting in dungeons. I'll play a quick few pieces here so you can get a sense of the soundtrack. And I also enjoyed exploring the city, however the zones are pretty limited. They're not that big and have a lot of these gated off areas, and also there's a lot of repeated NPCs, again kind of showing the game's budget. Now for the gameplay, I am really trying to be understanding as this game is clearly still in development and a lot of the pieces probably haven't been added to the final build yet. For example, a lot of the actions don't have sound effects like picking up a treasure in a dungeon. The game overall is weirdly devoid of sound effects. Whether you're exploring the city or a dungeon, it's just eerily quiet. and transitioning from story scenes to gameplay is pretty jarring. In other games, you might see something like fading to black or some kind of animated transition, but here it just jump cuts and it's really jarring. Also, the camera could use some work. It kind of wigs out when you're swinging it around and it bumps into like another character or a wall, so this definitely needs some polishing. All of these things might not seem like a big deal as I'm explaining it, but they're really common in a lot of games that we play, and when they're not there, it just feels really odd. Now let's talk about the dungeons and combat for a minute. So here you don't play as Doe, you play as the two other characters, Graham and Butterfly. Again, I'm not sure how they tie into the story and why they can explore the dungeons, but Doe can't, but that's just how it is. So the dungeons are relatively simple. You'll kind of just follow the paths, fight enemies, pick up treasures, do some puzzles that are honestly kind of brainless. There's some where you need to activate these roadblocks so they can move up and down, and all you have to do is wait for them to move up and you run under them. There doesn't seem to be any consequences or really any thought to it. Now the combat on paper sounds really interesting. It's turn-based and enemies have different weaknesses, and like I said earlier, both characters share 1 HP pool, which I've really never seen in a game before. One thing I do love about the combat is that it does have a turn order at the top of the screen at all times. I always love when turn-based combat has this included because not only do you get a chance to see what's happening next, but this also really helps with your strategy. This is particularly key here in Mato Anomalies because all your characters share 1 HP pool, so being able to tell what's coming up next is super important. And also your abilities take turns to refresh, which kind of adds some stakes to the combat. However, I will say it felt a little mindless, if not totally pointless at times. Right in the main menu, it gives you the option to do auto battle, and then when you do auto battle, it gives you the option to skip the animation. So it's basically like, hey, don't even participate in the combat if you don't want to. At that point, why even have battles?
Not enough, then I'll give you.
My trap
If one strike is not.
My trap should.
If one strike is not.
It's my turn.
If one strike is not.
Now, I will say that the boss fights were interesting. It felt tense because you needed to really wait for some of your stronger abilities to refresh, or even wait for your heal abilities to refresh. And like I said, because your entire party shares 1 HP pool and sometimes you can get hit really hard, it adds a level of tension that I've not really seen in a game before. Overall, the combat's not bad, and in fact, it does some really unique things, but I can't quite put my finger on it. It just feels like something's missing. Now let's talk about mind hacks, because right now this is by far the weakest mechanic in the game. Again, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. You're given a deck of cards, and every turn you get 4 cards, and they have different abilities, and you have a pool of mana, if you will, to use these cards to do damage to the character's psyche. And they have 3 different parts of their psyche that have individual HP points, and once you knock it down, in a few turns they will revive, if you will. However, after completely failing this battle twice because I didn't know what I was doing, I found out that I could just attack the character directly instead of their individual psyche points. In later mind hacks, these other psyches, like the bully, can heal the character you're trying to interrogate, so taking them all out is vital if you want any prayer of finishing the mind hack. They get more complex as the game goes on, which unfortunately only added to the confusion with no tutorial here in my time playing. Now, this probably sounds like I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this mechanic, but again, I was just thrown in with no explanation, so I'm just kind of doing the best I can here. Again, having a tutorial might explain this part better, and it could make more sense in the full context of the game, but as it stands right now, this is easily the weakest part of the game. Mato Anomalies has some neat ideas with its combat system, a strong comic book inspired art style, and atmospheric music, but also has some polishing to do. All of this could be solved by just starting from the very beginning of the game with proper tutorials and the full context of what's going on with the story, which I hope is the case. When I played the game, there were so many icons encouraging side activities, and in the full context of the game, there could be a really neat gameplay loop. I love the idea of a moody detective noir JRPG that would be something completely unique and fresh to the genre, and I hope that Mato Anomalies can be that game. My hope is that the development team can take all the feedback from these early impressions to polish the game into something super fun and really unique. If anything here looks the slightest bit interesting, there's a free demo on Steam if you want to give it a try. It's about 30 to 60 minutes long and has the option of either English, Chinese, or Japanese voices. I'll drop a link in the description and in the pinned comment down below so you can try it for yourself today. Once again, I want to thank the team at ArrowWiz for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate the opportunity to try this game early. And if you enjoy JRPGs and want to stay up to date with the latest news, reviews, and other fun videos, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.